City Center Radio. This is episode 303, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Friday, October 18th, 2024. I've got that Friday feeling, and I hope you all do too. I also hope your week was good, and hey, no matter what, good or bad, it's the weekend. Get out there, have some fun. The weather has been pristine. At least I really like it. A little bit cooler, so you're not stepping outside and immediately sweating. We're finally seeing, more towards the weather we expect in the fall, and I have been loving it. It's been a fun week. Nothing, I haven't gone out and done anything crazy, but the episode with Sarah Silverman, if you missed it, it's the most recent episode just before this one on Wednesday. Has gotten, the interview has gotten some, I've gotten some good feedback about the interview, I should say. And I appreciate those of you who have reached out or shared or, whatever, as far as commenting on it and everything. It's been good seeing that feedback. And yeah, it was a lot of fun to have someone of that stature on the podcast. And, maybe we'll get some more big names in the future. But today is just little old me, but I'm getting you caught up on the Charleston news, which is probably why you were here to begin with. But I hope you enjoyed that last episode as much as I did. Not much else going on in my world, so we're going to get into the news. But first, if you're looking for weekend plans, or really activities, events of any kind, any day, go to holycitycenter.com/calendar, and you can see the events calendar that I put a lot of time and effort into, so you better go check it out. Obviously kidding about you better go check it out. But I do put a lot of work into it because it is the most visited page on the website. People really, really like it. You may remember earlier this year, I actually late last year into this year, I switched the calendar to a different program, and I got a lot of messages of people saying, hey, I missed the old calendar. Brought it back, and as usual, it's the most visited page by far on the site. People always looking for things to do, whether they live here or they are visiting. So yeah, I try to get that as up to date as possible and get as many events in there, even if they seem a little off the wall or, there might be like two people interested in it. We try to get as much in there as we can. So go check it out, find some plans. If you are hosting an event of any kind, you can submit your event on the website, on that page, and then I can go ahead and approve it and get it added to the calendar. So, it's impossible to find every single event out there when it's just me doing it. There's so much going on. So if you know of something or are involved in something, you don't see it, go ahead and submit it. I'm happy to include it. But with that, let's get into the latest news. Bad news for Boeing. I know, stop me if you've heard that before, but this is not the typical thing we are used to hearing from them over this last year or so, but it shouldn't be too much of a surprise based on all that previous bad news and bad press that they've been getting. The company is planning to cut about 10% of their workforce. Now, that means about 17,000 people are affected by that decision, as the job cuts will include employees, executives, and managers. So out of 170,000 employees that Boeing has worldwide, there's about 6,500 at the North Charleston facility. So far, it's unclear if or how many people, if at all, are going to be included in these cuts. The Boeing South Carolina Delivery Center in North Charleston has not clarified whether workers at that facility will be affected by the layoff. So, not that we want anybody to get laid off, but fingers crossed that it won't affect many, and even more hoping that no one is affected in our community. But regardless, certainly not good news for the company at large. So Boeing has reported a loss of over $25 billion since early 2019, and it is dealing with a strike right now that's involving nearly 33,000 hourly workers. And that's not to mention what I alluded to, and I'm sure you're all well aware of, the many, many problems they've had, mechanical issues, some horrific crashes that happened in previous years. It has not been good news. They're, in trouble on the federal level because of, some shortcuts that they allegedly took and processes that they just ignored or weren't doing properly. So shouldn't come as a huge surprise that they're struggling financially. And unfortunately, that trickles down to some of their employees. Again, about 17,000 people will be laid off. Again, fingers crossed it doesn't affect our community here, but we'll see what happens. I'll be sure to keep you up to date. Disbarred Low Country attorney Alex Murdaugh has been dropped from a wrongful death lawsuit following an insurance payout to a teen victim's family. Court documents confirm that the family of Mallory Beach will receive a $500,000 payout from Murdaugh's insurance company. Murdaugh was one of several named in this wrongful death lawsuit that was filed by Beach's family. Mallory Beach was just 19 years old when she died in a boat crash on February 24th, 2019. That boat was driven by Murdaugh's son, Paul, and really started, got the wheels going for the downfall of the Murdaugh family. This was the event that really put into motion, probably the murders of Alex's wife and Paul, his son, and then of course led to discovery of all these financial problems and stealing money from clients. And this was the event really that things really started to take a turn for that family. Now, of course, it was a gigantic event and tragic for the Beach family. So let's not lose the focus on them about this situation. So Beach, obviously, since Paul Murdaugh was driving the boat, she was a passenger. Murdaugh was, appeared to be drunk. I think that was proven. I don't remember the exact level and everything. When he struck the Archers Creek Bridge, which is near Paris Island. Others in the boat suffered injuries. As far as lawsuits are concerned, there was a previous settlement that was signed in July of 2023 by Parker's Corporation. They agreed to pay $15 million to the Beach family. The reason that they were involved in this lawsuit is authorities said it was Parker's location in Ridgeland, where Paul Murdaugh, who also, by the way, was not of drinking age. So put aside the fact that he was drunk and, he went to some bars and stuff and maybe shouldn't have been served. But putting that aside, he is not even old enough to drink, but he used his brother's ID, and he was seen purchasing alcohol before that boat crash. So with this insurance payout, that means Murdaugh has been dropped from a wrongful death lawsuit. So that takes care of that as far as legally. And this will put an end to the whole boat case as far as payouts and lawsuits and everything. Obviously, there won't be any court case involving Paul as he was murdered. But that was something that was coming up for that family. So this puts an end to that as far as payments and things, but certainly a tragic event that will not be forgotten anytime soon. Shifting gears completely, let's get into some food and bev related talk here. Actor, director, and really, at this point, kind of a comedy legend, Danny McBride, who is behind shows like Eastbound and Down, and then the Charleston film shows Vice Principals and the Righteous Gemstones, has announced that he has launched a tequila. Yes, another celebrity alcohol brand. But McBride made the announcement through the tequila's Instagram account. And by the way, the name of the tequila is Don Gato. He made it through that brand's Instagram, which is at Don Gato Tequila, DONGATO Tequila. You can see a series of videos that he has put together, and it features this fictional luchador, which is like a Mexican wrestler by the name of Don Gato. And of course, they're humorous and silly. But yes, these tequila sagas, as he calls them, were a way to promote this new tequila brand. As far as where you can get it, I've heard it's actually available right now in some bars around town, and I would imagine that means it's probably in liquor stores as well. I haven't heard any feedback from anybody. Is it good? What's it like, or anything like that? But it's out there, so go find it if you're interested and let me know how it is, and I'll pass that word along. There's been a lot of misinformation and outright lies on the internet. I know, shock, gasp, can you believe it? But specifically, we're talking about with the hurricanes. Now, for those of you who are not chronically online like I am, you may miss some of the more insidious and off the wall accusations that are out there. If you're just consuming maybe your nightly news or not even that, you might only know about the argument about how people, particularly on the right, are saying FEMA is giving too much money to illegal immigrants. This is their words and accusations. So there's not enough money for Americans affected by disasters. That's the big one that's out there. It's been proven false. Specifically, the part where people were claiming money was taken out of the disaster relief fund and put into funds that FEMA has for giving to local organizations that help with migrant outreach. And this isn't illegal, by the way, illegal immigrants. These are people who are legally here. They went through the process of making sure that they could be in this country. Maybe they're seeking asylum, things like that. But putting all that aside, there's a lot of just like even more wacky things out there. Other claims about FEMA, like taking people's property or something. And um, I, there's no point in getting into it and possibly spreading this nonsense further. But just like a lot of things with misinformation involving something that can, if someone believes it, can really get them fired up and upset if they believe some of these things. And no surprise, we're seeing real life consequences from that. And although it was mostly involving North Carolina and Florida, here in South Carolina, there was a minor incident, to be fair, not anything that's too bad. But, you never know if it would have turned bad. And it kind of demonstrates what this nonsense that people put out there can do. Again, these are real life consequences. So, FEMA, which is the Federal Emergency Management Agency, they temporarily suspended outreach activities in Orangeburg County following what they called a safety incident. Now, FEMA was at the Bowman Library, and this past Monday at 11 a.m., they stopped all activities. And this is more out of an abundance of caution, but it does come after a similar incident in North Carolina where FEMA contractors were getting threatening messages, and a man was arrested because of those. Now, back to Orangeburg County, in this Bowman incident, there was one disruptive community member, according to FEMA, and out of abundance of caution, they closed down the site. Now, the man, he actually reached out to WIS News 10, and he said he's the person who was being disruptive. So he told on himself. So, okay, well, why did he do it? Well, he thankfully provided a reason, and it's exactly what you would think it was. This man owns an insurance business that was near the library where these outreach activities were happening. He was upset that FEMA trucks were blocking the parking lot into his business. And then he ended up showing WIS News 10 video of him going inside the library and telling FEMA workers to leave. He claimed that Orangeburg County did not need FEMA assistance and believed that FEMA was not going to harder hit parts of the U.S. that were impacted by Hurricane Helene. So at first, you're like, oh, he's just mad that these trucks were blocking his business. But then he adds that little thing at the end saying he didn't believe that FEMA was going to the places they should be going. Again, this is all rooted in misinformation and outright lies that have been spread online. They are absolutely in North Carolina, for instance. They are 100% in Florida, who's dealing with not just Helene, but Hurricane Milton as well. These are all false accusations. So clearly, even though he may have been upset about the trucks too, he had to add that in there as if FEMA is just twiddling their thumbs in Orangeburg County and not going to other places that were harder hit. So, because of this nonsense, if there were people in Orangeburg County, and I'm sure there were, because there were parts of South Carolina that certainly had issues related to the storm. They were doing outreach activities. They were there to help people. Perhaps there are some people that will not get the help they need now because this one man just decided to throw a huge stink. And because FEMA workers are getting threatened in person, online, and phone calls and emails, they were just like, hey, let's not even mess around with this. Let's at least temporarily halt this. It's just so sad that this is where we're at, where someone who is not even a reporter, let alone it's one thing, if it's being reported by a news outlet, but people don't even care about that anymore. They just want to believe what they want to believe. I could go on the internet right now, make up some nonsense, and as ridiculous as it is, there's going to be people who believe it just because they want to. And usually the want to part is dependent on your political party. If I go on and say something against Trump that I just completely made up, there's a lot of people out there who would just believe me because they want to. If I do the same about Harris, the opposite will happen. There'll be a different group of people who want her to look bad. You get it. And it's just so sad that this is where we're at. Whatever. If you want to believe some nonsense you read on the internet, it's a free country. You do you. You don't have to believe truth. You don't have to believe evidence, as we've seen over and over again with a lot that's happened over the last handful of years. But when it comes to real life consequences, January 6th comes to mind. And then these, although thankfully no one has been hurt or injured, like, what happened on January 6th, these are still things that could potentially have put FEMA workers who are just trying to do their job in harm's way. And it's just sad and disgusting that this is where we're at. One more story for you, and it's not horrible news, but not the best, and it involves our schools here in South Carolina, which we all know have been in the bottom, I don't know, bottom five, nationally ranked for as long as I can remember. I'd be surprised if it was, you know, anything better than bottom five. I can't remember the last time I saw any good reports. But in any event, a new report came out saying fewer high schoolers enrolled in or applied for college this fall, despite the graduation rate for the class of 2024 being slightly better than the previous year. This is according to a new state report card that was released on Tuesday. So, first off, hats off to new superintendent Ellen Weaver, who got a sweetheart 6-month master's degree from a iffy university called Bob Jones University. You can look up why it's iffy. And she's been busy fighting cultural wars, bringing on a right wing program called PragerU, with this ridiculous videos and lessons for children. Been too busy doing that stuff and all these other culture war issues, that we're seeing less of our high schoolers even not just getting into college, but not even enrolling. Not that everybody needs to enroll in college. Certainly not something everybody needs to do. All sorts of people don't go to college and are wildly successful and are perfectly fine without it. But it's not great to see that rate going down. Now, that's for the whole state. Here in the low country, school scores in Berkeley, Charleston, and Dorchester counties were actually at or above average, and overall school rankings have improved in recent years. So that's good news. Now, part of that, of course, is the pandemic, and so a lot of scores dropped. We saw how that affected students. So these increases are certainly good, and we want to see them, but they're either getting us back to where we were, or we're not even still. They're just improvements on these 2020, 2021, 2022, when we really were seeing the effects of what the pandemic had on learning. State education officials released the 2023-2024 South Carolina annual school report cards. These detail how each district in the state performed, and it breaks down each school and its academic process. You can visit the link in the show notes to get more details about schools in our area, but also the state in general. I'm not going to go one by one. I'm just going to kind of give you the overview. Overall, this year's report card showed fewer schools received the excellent rating than last year. So, again, hats off, Ellen Weaver. But on the flip side, fewer schools also received the lowest rating, which is unsatisfactory, than last year. So, although we don't have as many excellent schools, which is like the top tier according to these report cards, which is not good, there are fewer in that unsatisfactory, which is the lowest rating. So, lose a little at the top, get a little bit better at the bottom. So, it's one of those things where it's like, so it kind of just evens out. Certainly good to get schools out of that unsatisfactory. That's a bigger deal than losing a couple in the excellent category, but still not the best of news. Now, in addition to that and the I'm sorry, the drop in kids applying for and going to college, another one of the big findings they found was that there is chronic absenteeism, which is defined as students missing at least 10% of the school year. According to the report card, 1 in 5 students in South Carolina are considered chronically absent. So, again, not good news at all in that sense. So, overall, not a horrible report. Some good stuff. Seems like a little bit more bad stuff overall, but not in a devastating, they're not going to recover type way. So it's a mixed bag for sure. But so far, it seems the whole culture war thing isn't helping our students get better in any way, let alone any significant way. So maybe they should get back to focusing on actually teaching and not fighting this culture war BS that we have been inundated with over the last, 3, 4, 5 years. That'll do it for this edition of Holy City Center Radio. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I got a little preachy on those last two, and just things that anger me. The culture wars thing, as I said, just bugs me so much. And then, of course, people lying on the internet and misinformation. These are things that just make my blood boil because they've been so damaging to this country. So, anyway. Thank you for listening. I hope it wasn't too preachy or soapboxy, but I really appreciate you listening. If you have a chance, please subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss any episodes. It also helps get this podcast out there to more people. Thank you to Lindsay Marie Collins with LMC Soundsystem for producing this and every episode of Holy City Center Radio, and Tyler Boone, whose music you hear in each and every show. Have an amazing weekend. HolyCityCenter.com/calendar is where you can find some plans for this weekend and beyond. I can't wait to speak to you. I know I just finished this episode, but I can't wait to be back on the mic next week. But until then, good night and good luck.